Let's be real, we've all had those crafting moments where the glue won't stick, the paint smudges, and suddenly your perfect DIY turns into a full-on disaster. But don't panic. In today's video, we're sharing a fun and helpful compilation of real crafting mistakes made by our very own design team, and how they turn them around like total pros. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned crafter, these tips will help save your projects and your sanity.
Okay, it's going to be a little messy because you can see that there's pigment here in my brush. That's fine. Okay, so there's a couple of ways, as I said, to go about it. Oh, okay, it's going to drip. Drip, drip, drip. It's going to drip again. Oh, okay, that's why. This was loose. Anyway, let's just pull in. Okay, we're going this way. Because it's dripping, I'm just gonna do this first. Work around. I'm gonna spread it outwards. And I'm not using any water right now because, as you can see, I have a lot of pigment here. An unfortunate accident, but that's fine. Once I have my pigment here, then I can bring in some water just to dilute it so that once it mixes with the rubellite, kind of mixes well. And don't worry about going outside the lines. Looks like it's going to be more warm sunshine than it's going to be rubellite. That's fine. Okay, putting it back. This is not my intention, but this is what's happening now. Going to bring in rubellite, and I'm going to apply it in the same manner now because things have changed. Going to bring in rubellite from petal tips inwards. Do not worry about going outside the lines. Apply it to the petal tips. Just add a bit of water here, and then activate your pigment. Bring it inwards. If you think there's just too much yellow, because in my case there is, then you just add more of that pigment. Activate the pigment, bring it inwards. You don't have to really work hard on mixing this or try to get a beautiful blend, because this will work beautifully on its own. I love how freeing this technique is. No stress about staying inside the lines, just pure creativity. I will use a jet black ink spray on a pan and add some fine black splatters. And it was here when a big blob of ink dropped on the corner of the panel. So I quickly blotted with a tissue, but then selectively stamped a leaf and colored it in to cover it as much as I could. So after I was done with the panel, there was a bit of a smudge on the top right of the panel, the top portion. And so I decided, instead of stamping more floral images on the panel, I used the stamp wheel, the back side of the stamp wheel that has the grid. I applied pink pearl and a bit of Pinkalicious and randomly stamped this pattern to the panel. This was mostly on the right hand side. That's just to cover that pink smudge. For this too, I can stamp a sentiment on the right hand side.
And when I was removing the stencil, I accidentally moved it towards one side, dragging that paste underneath the stencil, and I spoiled the image. So that was painful because I already spent maybe 20-30 minutes on this image, and now it's useless. So the Lazy BB said, okay, let's stencil all the outlines first, and then we do the coloring. But then the tape I was using to cover some areas of the stencil stuck to the background panel, and when I was going to lift the stencil, it moved a little bit and I got some smearing. It was minimal, nobody will notice, but then I still have another layer of the stencil to go through. And when I was doing that, I then messed up my panel a little bit more. So this wasn't happening. It was a completely different story if I was using just an outline stencil to transfer just that outline. But I don't have such a stencil in my stash, so I could not do that for today. having other ideas in mind and failing at every experiment I was doing to achieve them, I decided to grab the packaging of the stencil, that is this cello bag here, and I decided to stencil the images over this and also over acetate. The reason I thought that I could do this is because the paste has like a plastic consistency when it dries, and then I could lift it with a spatula and glue it over my stenciled and color images without risking messing up my panels. So that's how this idea was born, and I'm sharing the whole process here. I also noticed that placing the cello bag over the sticky mat was a terrible idea because it wasn't easy to remove it from the mat and I could risk damaging the image. So what I did next was just placing the cello bag over the work surface, nothing underneath, and nothing to attach the stencil to the cello bag. Then I stenciled a bunch of images, not just this one, but I also used another stencils that are absolutely stunning. But sadly, I didn't film the whole process because the 3 battery packs I have for my camera died on that day, and I really wanted to get all the stencil done and come back next day to see if my idea would work or not. So that night I stenciled different layers of a stenciled image using different paste colors. And this worked. It was easier to remove the dry paste from the cello bags than from the acetate, and the next step was adding all these little layers created in different paste colors over a stenciled and color image simultaneously without the need to wait for each layer to dry, and eliminating completely the risk of smearing. So using a palette knife, and as you see there, I'm lifting each piece without pushing, bending, or stretching the pieces. This is very delicate, and even the heat of your hand could affect the consistency of the pieces, so the less you touch them, the better. So my advice is to leave them there until you need to really add them to your projects. Okay, so what we are going to do is to stencil the image first using inks, and I'm using here Arctic, and at the center of the image I'm applying Nimbus just to achieve that beautiful color degradation. Then I will advise to leave piece by piece from the plastic, the acetate, or the cello bag and glue one by one. They are very flimsy and can get damaged, and secondly, it will also allow you to identify the placement for each piece. This was looking really good, so I went ahead and I used a very soft green ink color to stencil the leaves, and this will also allow me to identify where I have to adhere the different pieces. And here I'm using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. This gives me also the idea to do this over materials like wood, for example, for a wooden frame or a box, over canvases or ceramic using acrylic paints or gouache through the stencils, and also applying this kind of metallic accents. As I said before, the paste has a different look and feel when you add it this way to your projects than when you stencil the paste directly on the paper. And here you can see how smooth and flat this look. Just beautiful. And this is the way to go to add that multicolor effect to this type of stenciled images, especially when you are using a stencil like this one that is called Serene Garden, and it has 5 layers. It's absolutely gorgeous and perfect to share with you this idea because this butterfly stencil has too many little gaps that you can fill with the paste. But if you fill the whole image with paste, it's going to look very flat. And here's when the things get very interesting, because I'm going to be adding different paste colors over the butterfly wings and the butterfly body by simply adding these little stickers or peel off we have made with the paste. If you bring your cello bags and you place them over the stenciled image, you can have a better idea on how to use those pieces. For me, this is a hobby, and the biggest joy I always have is to give flesh to my ideas. And the first idea I had when I saw the pasted, it was creating a multicolor image using them. So it was an adventure trying to find a way to make this possible. And now you don't have to think that hard as I did. Actually, this was super easy, and I don't know how I didn't think about this before. And this is also mistake-free from the very beginning. If you stencil the image on the cello back and the image doesn't transfer well, you can use the palette knife to lift the paste from the cello back while this is still wet, and then use another cello back to repeat the process. And if the paste dries a little bit, there is no problem at all. I have shared across the whole video that when you use paste that has been left to air dry for a little bit, they perform better. So for this image, I use 4 colors of paste, and you can easily choose where to add one color or another and which pieces to add. You don't need to add them all, just the pieces that can take your stenciled image to the next level. Some of the pieces could be very small, so it's good to have a perfect picker by Altenew to lift some of those pieces. You can also use your fingertips, but having some tools definitely makes our life easier. So there's 3 colors of paste laying there. I'm going to add very tiny little details in rose gold, and this whole process took me about 10-15 minutes. I'm a super slow crafter and I pay attention to the details. I lose the track of the time and I get my mind in another place, a happy place. I will compare this with paper piecing, but instead using paper, we are using the little pieces of paste. And there you go. This is the finished project.
So I cut out most of the coloring and literally threw in the towel with this one. For some reason, I was being extra critical of my painting and I was not liking how this watercolor panel was turning out. It looked really muddy, I lost the definition between leaves and petals, and yeah, I was done. Actually, I was pretty pissed. So I walked away from it for a bit, had some water, used the bathroom, ate, cried, and when I came back, I decided to reverse the mistake of this loose watercolor by adding in the outline image again. I didn't try to stamp the outline directly over the distress ink from earlier. I instead adjusted the outline so that it looked intentional. And so then it dawned on me that I would try to make this more of a loose watercolor card. Now, to be honest, I'm not great at loose watercolor either. I try to focus more on the details and then I lose track of the loose watercolor principle. Or what happens is I end up getting sloppy and rush it, and it looks like a monochromatic blob of a flower. So I took this card mistake as an opportunity to let go a little bit. There was no starting over with this card because the photos were due the next day and I had to get to bed for work in the morning. I carried on and took the markers directly to the paper. If I felt there needed to be more color variation, I just added it. There was no thinking of detail, shadows, petal veining, none of that. In the end, I was surprised that out of my frustration came this final watercolor panel. And honestly, even though I was about ready to start over, I ended up liking this panel much more than the botanical illustration type image I was originally aiming for.
Crafting fails fixed. We hope this video gave you some solid tricks to keep in your crafting toolkit. If you picked up a tip or two, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss a dose of crafty inspiration. Got your own DIY disaster story? Share it in the comments, we'd love to hear it. Until next time, happy crafting. Loved watching this video. There is more where that came from here on the Altenew official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon and happy crafting.